Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Now, as we know, the government intends to bring in the purchase of new petrol and diesel cars to be illegal from 2030, and from that date, all new cars must be electric. There are already calls for that date to be pushed back because we're not ready. One of the calls is coming from the national grid, which says not only are we not ready, we're unlikely to be ready even by 2035. We just don't have the capacity in the system to start charging up millions of electric cars. And this is something that's been said from day one. If every car in the country was electric, we'd need something like 38 nuclear power stations to be built. It's taken 30 years to build one. It's never going to happen. On top of that, of course, with all these massive increase in number of electric cars, you've got nowhere near enough charge points. It's going to lead to fisticuffs, breakdown, brawls, fights at charge points. Someone's been on there. I was here first. You were there. And then you've been on there too long, and that sort of thing. It is going to be chaos, which is why in 2029 I'll be going out and buying as good a car as I can afford that it is not electric. And that's the problem. When you have a system that hasn't been thought out, but has been, knocked together, a policy knocked together on the back of an envelope, it sounds good. It's a good sound bite. We'll deal with the problem later, and then you don't get around to dealing with the problems, and then the deadline starts approaching. You have two options: stick with it bravely, or admit you're an idiot. And we know what happens when politicians are faced with that choice. So we'll take a quick look at this to see why the UK's national grid is nowhere near ready. Here goes. Right, and as we said, it's just there isn't enough there. We're going to be talking about replacing millions upon millions of cars. They're all going to need to be charged, most twice a day, some at home, but then some when you're out. And you've got the whole of the country. Now, you think someone in the Highlands of Scotland, for example, there's not many chargers up there, and you can go a long way between places that are going to likely have chargers. And the worst of it is, of course, once you put a caravan on the back of your car, which people like to do up there especially, your mileage doesn't just fall by 10 or 15%. It's a third. It's a third of what you think you were getting. You can be down to maybe, with a caravan, a 50-mile radius of where you are. If you're going to run out, you are going to be stranded. And even the police up there in Scotland are saying it's no good, because if they're chasing anyone, they're going high-speed pursuit and that. They can't maintain the charge for long enough. They've been on parole, something happened, been on parole. Been on patrol, they're probably down, something's happened, bang, and they're done. And it isn't a case of, quick, we'll nip in here while we've got 5 minutes and fill up. It's like, we've got to stop for half an hour. Meanwhile, something happens. They're stuck for half an hour waiting to put a charge on a car. Totally wrong. Anyway, the UK's national grid is not ready for the increase in demand from electric cars, the service station boss warns. And add to that, of course, all the new houses have to be electrically powered. There's no gas going in, all that electric heating. That's a hell of a draw, constantly. They haven't worked out how much more they need for that. 38 power stations, 38 nuclear power stations is needed for this. Ken McMichael raised the concerns amid the 2030 ban on petrol and diesel cars. The motor boss said the power required for electric vehicles was not available. And he's absolutely right. At the moment, there is not enough generation capacity, and there is not enough transmission capacity. I don't know what the government are thinking. You cannot suddenly do this and go, we'll build it later. Because no one's building it now, and you're running out of time. Anyway, Ken McMichael said there was a major problem getting enough power for electric chargers amid concerns the 2030 ban on new diesel and petrol sales will put pressure on infrastructure. It won't. It just people won't buy cars. And indeed, another side of this is that the government have put a penalty clause in. And that is, after 2030, if the car manufacturers aren't selling enough cars, there'll be a penalty on those cars they are selling. They have to sell a certain percentage on the run up to and after. So it's like basically from now onwards, if they don't sell something like at the moment is 10% of their cars have to be electric cars, or they get a fine for every car they haven't sold. And that increases, and it goes up next year to 15%, then to 20%, and so on, 5% a year. And so if they sell, so for example, they sell 100 diesel and petrol cars, they have to sell 10 electrics. If they only sell 9, they have to pay the government £15,000 for the one they didn't sell. Now, that doesn't come from car sellers. It's not the seller's point, it's the manufacturers. So imagine Toyota going, actually, no, we're not going to play these silly games, and getting rid of the Toyota factory in Swindon. Imagine Nissan going in the northeast because of these silly, pointless rules that will achieve nothing. That will be disastrous. Absolutely disastrous. And yet it will achieve nothing. Nothing. Because Britain is such a small contributor. It is not even registerable. They haven't got instruments accurate enough to register our output on a global scale. That's how pointless it is. Anyway, McMichael said it was fine to set targets for the number of electric vehicle charging points at motorway service stations. But he said there were serious questions about whether the grid had the power to supply them. And the other thing is, of course, it's going to be like petrol at a motorway service station. You know, your electricity at home is cheap, you know, but your electricity at a service station will be very expensive. And indeed, now people are finding that these high charge point things, to charge your car at a high charge point, is now more expensive than filling your car up with petrol. So you spend a lot more on the car in the first place, and then running it is way more expensive. But hey, you're saving the planet. You're not saving the planet. Also, have you seen the nasty stuff it takes to actually make one of these cars? It's disgusting. Anyway, he told BBC Radio 4's Today programme, we've got a situation where you just couldn't write the script. We have put sufficient charges on 4 of our service areas and the power required is not available. Electric vehicle drivers are turning up and there are chargers sitting there but no power. And of course not, because they haven't got grid capacity yet. They're not even close to it. And that's with current car numbers. Think how bad it's going to be as every car becomes an electric car over the next, say, 20 years. They haven't got a clue. And they don't know how to solve it. Because the only way you can solve it is to build more power stations. And if you're going to do that, then all this electricity can only come from one place. Fossil fuel. Pointless then, isn't it? Let's just burn the fossil fuel. It's madness. Anyway, he added, I think there is a major problem facing the whole industry and this whole transition to electric vehicles, which is not being addressed by the government and the power companies. What, you think so? Are you suggesting that they've come up with a policy and they don't understand the implications? What people want, if they're going to make a switch to electric cars, is a reassurance they will have sufficient charging capacity around the whole of the UK to actually make the journeys. Getting the right number of chargers is not a challenge. Getting enough power for those chargers to operate well enough for electric vehicle drivers is a major problem. Unless, of course, you can develop a car, an electric car, which can do a range of, say, 700 miles on a charge, and where a charge takes no more than say 5 minutes. You do that and it's viable. Until you do that, it's not viable. And also, what are you going to do with all the dead batteries? Because they can't just be dumped. They're very, very nasty. They're filled with toxic chemicals. And where do these toxic chemicals come from? All these mines, and they're stripped out. And you see the pictures, all the children working in these lithium mines. That's an industrial claim waiting to happen. They aren't as clean as you think. And, of course, the particles that come off of them from off the brakes and tyres is far, far heavier than what comes off normal cars, because these cars are quite heavy. If you want to truly clean up the atmosphere, stop buying shit from China. Anyway, I shall stop there. Thank you very much for that. I'll come up and we will round off the video. Of course, the reality is it's got nothing to do with saving the planet. All these things have nothing to do with saving the planet. Low emission zone. Oh yeah, we'll just put all these cameras up. But if you want true low emission, why not just make the MOT test harder? And then you know all cars in the country have passed that stricter level. You then don't need all those cameras. But those cameras, of course, aren't there for low emission zones. They're there for road pricing. They're there for monitoring us. And then you have the low traffic neighbourhoods. They aren't there for low traffic neighbourhoods. They're there to kettle people and control them and keep them in their designated areas. Welcome to the Hunger Games, District 9. And it's all to do with control. And electric vehicles are controlled because they can switch your cars off remotely. If you don't think that's true, I think I've got a bridge to sell you. So if you've been a naughty boy, bang. Oh, and you don't get your car for a week until you learn your lesson. Seriously, check out the software in these things. These cars can be switched off remotely. Social credits, anyone? Brave new world. Anyway, I should stop there. Thank you very much for watching. If you like what you're seeing here on the channel, please hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, leave a like, leave a comment, please share the video. And until next time, stay safe, stay well, and don't trust these bastards because they haven't got your best interest in heart and it's got nothing to do with the environment. Bye.